Happy Saturday. This is Adelita Grijalva, and we're at Plática with Adelita, where we're discussing issues that are facing our community here in Pima County and how we can work together to ensure that we overcome challenges. Today, we're going to be discussing the American Rescue Plan. It's a $1.9 trillion COVID relief package signed into law by President Biden in March. And it's really historic. It's aimed at boosting the economy and ending this pandemic. It's a historic piece of legislation that is among the largest economic stimulus packages in American history. So if you received your stimulus check this year for $1,400, this is the reason why. This is the bill that made that happen. But stimulus checks were not the only thing that passed in the American Rescue Plan. So what I have the privilege of gathering three people who I consider very much experts in this field, and they are working with three members of Congress that are representing Arizona. And so I wanted to give them an opportunity to introduce themselves, but very quickly I'll say Billy or William Kovacs is here with Representative Kirkpatrick. Kelsey Mishkin is here with my favorite congressman. No disrespect to the other two, but he's my dad, so he is my favorite, Representative Raul Grijalva. And then Joanna Mendoza is here with Representative O'Halloran. And so I'm going to let them each introduce themselves, a little bit about their ties to Arizona, and just talking about what they do for the office. And so I'll go ahead and start with Joanna.
Oh, okay. Well, hello. First of all, thank you so much for inviting us to this conversation. Such an important opportunity to share all of the good stuff that's in the American Rescue Plan. So as Adelita shared, my name is Joanna Mendoza. I work for Congressman O'Halloran in Congressional District 1, which is a congressional district in Arizona that is almost the size of Illinois. I mean, it is a huge district. A lot of rural areas. We have 12 of the 22 tribes in our congressional district. And my ties to Arizona, I'm a native Arizonan, born and raised in Pinal County, small town kid from Eloy, raising my son here, and honored to do, the work of the people on behalf of Congressman O'Halloran. Happy to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Joanna. Kelsey, can I go next?
Hi, my name is Kelsey Mishkin. I work for Adelita's favorite congressman, Mr. Raul Grijalva, represents Pima County, surrounding areas down to Yuma County area. I don't have any direct ties to Arizona, but I do refer to myself often as an Arizona adoptee because I have worked for the congressman for about 14 years now. I focus mostly on federal policy issues, and those include healthcare, budget issues, and pandemic response, among other issues. So happy to be here and happy to talk about this super important topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelsey. And Billy.
Thank you, Supervisor Grijalva. I appreciate welcoming our office to this conversation, along with Rep. O'Halloran and your favorite, Rep. Grijalva. So District 2, if a lot of people don't know, stretches from about Midtown Tucson all the way to the border. It backs up next to Rep. Grijalva's district and goes all the way to New Mexico. So we take the eastern part of the bottom of the state, so all of Cochise County and half of Pima County. So that's the district. For the Congresswoman, I'm the outreach director. So I get to do a lot of these events where I see now Joanna and her new role, and the Grijalva team, as well as a lot of our local groups, our advocacy groups, and everybody that tries to interact and needs to interact with the federal government. So I cover a few different policy areas for the Congresswoman, as well as work with our team in the district office here in Tucson. Our district director, Carla Avalos, leads our team, and we work for the capacity of the Congresswoman here. So really happy to talk about the American Rescue Plan and everything else that is in that bill and how it affects Southern Arizonans. So thank you.
Yeah, and Billy, you actually did a very brief presentation to the Pima County Board of Supervisors, and I appreciate that, specifically about the American Rescue Plan, which is why I thought of you, because I'm like, oh, he's going to have some data right at the top of his head. So the American Rescue Plan, I mean, among others, provides funding opportunities for small business owners, veterans, people facing eviction, state and local relief assistance in COVID, vaccination and testing distribution, and funding for education, just to name a few. So for each of you, if you want to talk specifically about how it's affecting the district, but in general, what is the American Rescue Plan, aside from a significant amount of money directed towards all of us in Arizona? And anyone can jump in. I know, right?
We're all shy.
Yeah.
I mean, I can sort of
go ahead, Billy.
Okay. I mean, when you look at the American Rescue Plan, it really says it in its name. This is a sweeping piece of legislation that was really a safety net for the whole country and every single sector within the United States economy that was involved over the past year, that was affected by this pandemic. We saw the pandemic not just touch us with our own personal health care, but also all the things that we interact with as constituents and everyday Americans. Our infrastructure needs, our public transportation needs, our public health needs, our cities, our counties, their funding, as well as our schools, our access to internet, all of these things were really affected by COVID-19 and the pandemic. And what the American Rescue Plan is really this safety net that came up and understood that we need to reinvest in our country and help support the country as a whole to make sure that we can get out of this better than when we got into it. So this bill is one piece of what needs to happen from Congress and the executive and Democratic leadership to get us to that point. But it was one of the integral steps that we needed to take. So that's sort of how I think of it. But there's a lot of, like you said, a lot of particulars in there and a lot of funding for really everything that's involved in the American daily life.
Yeah. Either Joanna or Kelsey want to add to that?
Sure, I'll add. So I sort of see the American Rescue Plan as kind of two buckets. And Billy talked a lot about the economic response, which is so vital because we've been devastated. People have lost jobs. Businesses have been absolutely devastated and ruined. Our economy has, been in shambles in a lot of sectors. So the economic response is so huge. But to me, the most important part of the American Rescue Plan is shining a light at the end of the tunnel on this pandemic and saving lives. This plan is a comprehensive response from our government. It builds on the plans that we passed previously. It beholds the government to take a more active role in addressing this very serious virus that has killed so many of our loved ones. And to that purpose, it provides a national vaccination plan, which is going to really be that light at the end of the tunnel. And it is the safest and fastest way for us to get through this as a nation. And so I think that it's so vital because it provides the economic response, but it also saves lives. And that piece is so critical. It provides testing. It's going to allow counties like Pima County to continue some of their testing, their vaccination efforts, various mitigation techniques, contact tracing, and on and on and on. It's going to boost our county health departments. It's going to create a new public health job corps to get people into the jobs that we need them to be in so that we can be ready for this type of thing in the future and continuing to respond to the place that we are now. Because, we're seeing a lot of positive trends, but we are not out of the woods. And so the best way to protect our economy is to protect people in this country and make sure that we get this pandemic under control. And unfortunately, the ball was dropped at the beginning, and this bill is going to help us correct that path that we're on.
Yeah. Joanna, did you want to add? Go ahead.
Yeah, I did. Kelsey talked about something, the light at the end of the tunnel. We've heard across Congressional District 1, Congressman O'Halloran was in district last week, and we heard from people just how excited they were about all of the aid that was coming. And I think really, we've heard from folks, that in some cases, they have felt that the government has taken so much from them, right? And that finally, for the first time in such a long time since this pandemic began, people feel a renewed sense of trust in government. They feel like government is actually serving them. And I think that is so important. One other aspect that I wanted to add that's super important in the American Rescue Plan is that it empowers local municipalities, cities, towns, counties to address the unique needs in their communities. Who knows the communities best than the government closest to the people? So that's really significant, and I think is going to be impactful.
Yeah, one of the things that I really appreciated from this act is the funding coming directly to municipalities, to cities, to counties, to school districts, because where the first little batch of economic assistance stopped at the governor's office, and then it was the governor's responsibility, although things were earmarked, it was the governor's responsibility to get that funding directly to all of us. And it just didn't happen. And I know that throughout Arizona, it doesn't matter what political party you're on, we are on calls with counties across the state that are equally frustrated with the fact that we're looking at the numbers and we can all estimate this is how much we were going to get allocated. Pima County has been continued to start up all of these testing sites without any assistance, knowing that at some point it was going to come back. But we put in a request for funding that was essentially, I think we were requesting like 40 million and received like 1.4, those kind of things where, other counties that are not as large didn't have the capacity that maybe Pima County did. And that is really where I think a lot of the devastation happened in our communities. I just came from a pop-up site, which Pima County Health Department has done a really good job of targeting neighborhoods that have been drastically impacted by COVID. And now we're seeing this we had the rush of people that came up and we're all eager and we had huge long lines, and now those lines are dying down. And so we have the inventory and we don't actually have the arms to put the inventory in. Those vaccines need to get into the arms. So we might talk about, as part of this rescue plan, what is it that we can do to really encourage people and have them understand that this pandemic is not over. That in Pima County, we only have 35% of our population vaccinated. And we have variants that have been identified and are here in Pima County. I think the last number was 9 people that had the variant. And so all of that is going to be really critical. And I like that you mentioned, Kelsey, that, we need to prepare for if this should ever come again, because I sort of keep thinking about what is the possibility that we're going to have another kind of health crisis like this, and that we have to respond that way. So none of us want to see that, but the longer this COVID continues to sort of be able to manifest itself in different variants, it gets a little scary for the rest of us. And so what is the significance of this act passing? I mean, there was bipartisan support, not as much as we'd like to see, but what is the significance of this, and why do people keep talking about it as historic?
I mean, I think you touched on one really important aspect, which is the vaccination portion of this, right? And how that impacts especially underserved communities. We're talking about our tribes here, specifically in Arizona, who were, they were just devastated by this pandemic. And so the impact is that it will serve underserved communities, rural communities, tribal governments. It will provide the resources and aid that is needed to make sure that they have the resources to address the pandemic. You talked about the folks that showing up for vaccines, and a lot of that, there are some serious challenges, especially in rural areas, to folks getting out to some of these vaccine sites. And so some of that funding will go to, FEMA specific vaccine sites, pods that will specifically address our underserved communities. And so for me, I feel like the impact is just taking the aid where it needs to go, which, it's going to serve all of us.
Yeah. So how did either of you, Billy or Kelsey, want to add to that?
No, yeah.
She did a good job, right? I thought so.
Joanne did a great. I think she touched on a lot of the things there. Like I said in the opening remarks, this bill is so big it has touched every single part of this economy, and from the conversations our office has had from day one of the pandemic, we really see some of those things that you brought up, Adelita, about the difference between the state leadership and the past administration and their direction on solving the pandemic or not solving the pandemic, and really what this bill has truly done. It's ramped up. It's been able to catapult this new administration into being really action oriented to solving some of these problems that, remember, 120 days ago, there was different leadership. We had different leadership in this country, and there was a different response to the public health crisis. And we see a large contrast between this response and the Biden administration, having these funds, making sure that, like Joanne said, counties and cities have that amount of money to respond. Because every time we talk to a county or a municipality, they say, we don't have the funds. Is the federal government going to pay for this? And this bill allows that conversation to say, okay, now how can we solve this problem? Because we have the money. So from those comments earlier, I think that's truly the amount of resources that came to these parts of the economy are truly something that we haven't seen, because they all come at once, or before you'd have to go out for all these different grants. It's just it's a lot at a critical time, and I think it's exactly what we needed.
Yeah, I remember we were one of my memories, the nice thing about social media is memories will come up, and I was venting. I can't remember I know about what, but it reminded me, I'm like, I have not had that thought where you wake up in the morning and wonder what has been said by our president in 120 days. It's been really kind of calming. It's kind of nice. But we have a question from Kurt, thank you, Kurt, for listening in. And he asked, will any of the resources go towards ending homelessness? And one of my next questions was going to be, how does ARP impact Arizona and Pima County specifically? So if any of you wanted to answer Kurt's question, and maybe follow up with some other specifics, because we keep talking about it's going to impact, it's going to help jobs, it's going to help, but maybe talk about some of the specific pieces in the budget that people can sort of connect to.
Yeah, I'll just touch on this real quick, and the ladies probably have something to add on to it, because homelessness is something that we see across the country, and Pima County really, as we've seen some of that lack of leadership from the prior administration, has really stepped up and allowed a lot of the individuals to not reach that part of reach homelessness, and putting in their own moratoriums and putting their own money to solving some of the evictions problems that are going on. I think that's a part of that. In ARP specifically, I believe $5 million went to HUD for affordable housing resources. Obviously, it's a large chunk of money, but that is a drop in the bucket to the larger problem that we have. And hopefully, I'm not breaking up, because it looks like my internet's a little slow. But
you're good.
Those are some of the challenges. And I say this in our everyday workings of the office. There's not just one thing to focus on in terms of a lot of these problems. Money just doesn't solve it, or resources just don't solve it. It really takes a partnership between the state, the county, the nonprofit groups, as well as the federal government to come in and serve the community in this way. And so, just specifically out of the American Rescue Plan, about $5 million came to support. And then as HUD begins to look at what grants and what resources are pushed out there, Pima County is obviously one of the counties that goes out for a lot of these resources that are there. So that's how it specifically impacts it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone to add?
Yeah, I'll just add on. Yes, so yes, there are, as Billy said, direct funds to address homelessness. But I think also really important are the funds to prevent homelessness, because we know, and this is probably going to get to one of the questions that you might be asking a little later, because I have a feeling you'll tap into housing. Is that a lot of families are in a really tough position right now, and they are facing evictions. They have not been able to pay rent. They have been laid off of their jobs, or they have not been able to work because of health conditions, because they have contracted COVID. And so there is a big chunk of funding that will go to help those rental assistance programs continue. And so also preventing homelessness, and a wave that we could see if we were not to act urgently on this is an important piece of it as well. And then to answer the other part of your question, Adelita, is Pima County directly. I think, you really hit the nail on the head. We fought tooth and nail to make sure that there would be some direct assistance in this bill to localities. It was not something that every state in our nation pushed for, because some people might have been in states that their governments were very receptive to the local community's requests and pushed those funds through really quickly. But we definitely raised the issues that we were hearing about in Pima County, largely to the appropriators and to Ways and Means staff working on this bill, and said, look, we have to get this fund into the localities' hands, because they are not getting the fund they need to address this crisis. And so I think that is a huge win for Pima County. And then the other part is, a lot of the direct programs that are going to benefit the constituents. So I think, most people are aware of the stimulus checks, but there's also an increased child tax credit that is going to be a tremendous benefit to a lot of families, $3,600 for children under 6, and increased to $3,000 for children above 6. And they're also going to start releasing that incrementally, I believe starting in July. IRS, I think, announced that they can start that in July. There is an expanded earned income tax credit, as well as an expansion of the child dependent care credit, which, with the expenses of childcare, I can tell you, it's expensive. So
it's very expensive.
Families need that help, and so there's a lot of pieces of the bill that are going to go directly to constituents that are, really going to be helpful to help weather the rest of this.
Yeah. Joanna, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, just to kind of add on to what Kelsey said, the social service programs like SNAP, a lot of these programs are already out there that additional funding will be provided for these programs to help put people in a better situation and hopefully prevent, homelessness.
Mm-hmm. And there's some of the programs that they're talking about is job training programs, and how do we get people that their jobs may not come back. I mean, in some cases, that sort of business model or whatever it is, we have a lot of people that businesses have closed and those businesses may not open. And so how do we get people opportunities so they can be trained for the jobs that are needed? I've had this, I've been going department to department, like virtually, meeting in Pima County. And as an example, both in Tucson Unified and Pima County, about 60% of the workforce is retirement age. And so they're eligible. That doesn't mean they're going to retire, but they are eligible to retire. And so do we have people that are ready to take over those specialized jobs? And the overwhelming answer right now is no. So that's an opportunity that I think we have. Lee asks, and this question really has sort of bothered me because it speaks to transparency. And what she said is, will there be any matrix to track that the money being infused into local community achieves the intended outcomes? And then as a follow-up, for the funding that has already come and has not reached our cities and municipalities, is there going to be any kind of audit? Is there any kind of conversation about that?
Yeah, I mean, I know that there are requirements for how the money will be used. There are questions being asked on that transparency piece and accountability, which is extremely important. When it comes to empowering local municipalities with this money, one of the things, and it's kind of deviating a little bit away from the question, but I feel that it's relevant, is that there has to be some advocacy on the ground from communities, from constituencies to their local governments about how they would like to see that money being spent, right? And so I think that if you're meeting with your county supervisor or your town council member, you can certainly advocate and ask the question is, how do you plan on allocating the funding that has been given to, whatever municipality that you live in, right? And so I think that's an important question that constituents can also ask the questions of their local elected officials on how they plan on allocating the money so that there can be accountability, in addition to what the federal government requires.
Yeah, I think that's going to be really important because that was something that was greatly missing. And I'm hoping that we still have an opportunity because there's tens of millions of dollars, hundreds of millions that are not accounted for on our end.
So that's one of the things that has come up, and I think all of our offices have engaged in this over the last few months, is some of that accountability coming to the state in terms of localized or money that should be going to localities and counties, is trying to figure out where that went. As we see the American Rescue Plan, went directly to places like the city of Tucson and Pima County. There's some unanswered questions there in terms of the transparency from the state as to what some of that money was spent on. And I don't think anybody wants to go into sort of a scenario of an audit of how the state has used those things, but we're not getting some of those answers back that we've requested, right? As staff of members of Congress, we don't oversee the governor. That's not our role and responsibility, but we ask those questions. And so seeing more transparency in where those funds are going, because like you said earlier, Adelita, is a lot of these counties, whether Democratic or Republican leadership controls them, are asking the same questions around Arizona as where is the support and why isn't it coming soon enough, and how do we solve this public health crisis? So, that's something that we're very thoughtful and engaged in. As far as the American Rescue Plan comes in, each one of those pots of money has, guidelines to what it can be used for. Obviously education dollars, there's a whole different litany of things that it can be used for, and also the resources to counties and cities. So, like Joanna said, look for those metrics to be published by those counties or those recipients. But those are built in, the federal government. This isn't the first time the federal government's put out a bunch of money. So they do ask for reporting, and it's, it's something that is tracked.
Yeah. I was on a call with a small business commission, and there was some frustration because unemployment has been extended through the end of September. There seemingly isn't a requirement to go, as was in the past, where you have to get an application. And a lot of that, I'm sure, has to do with COVID and the spread of COVID, where you don't physically go in and have to prove that you're actively looking for a job. But in some cases, it is, with children still home, most of our children in TUSD, it's about 60% have opted to stay remote, even though they do have the option of coming in. And so for those families that it just makes a lot more sense to be able to stay home, some of them are not wanting to risk their health. And that's the interpretation that I took, not wanting to risk their health to go and get a job. But in the meantime, some of these small businesses, a lot of restaurants and bars are having a very hard time with finding entry-level staff to come in and, do bar backing and waitress and those things. And so I know that ARP has some benefits to small businesses, and in light of what I heard on that call, which is some frustration that there's not enough manpower out there to help really get the businesses back up and running in all cases, not in every case, but in some of the cases. How does the American Rescue Plan affect small business owners in our community?
Well, I think, unless somebody else wants to start.
No,
I think they left it to you, Kelsey. You're good.
I think, you really need to restore confidence to the employees that if they go out and work, they're going to be protected. And that is not something that we've seen. we have now an OSHA standard. Thank you to the new administration, because the last administration refused to allow OSHA to even put some guidelines out there to be able to enforce some COVID protections for our workers. And you can't really blame people for not wanting to risk their health. So step one has to be to restore confidence. And in order to do that, you have to get the pandemic under control. And I probably always revert back to this because my background's in public health. But in order to get our economy on track, we have to get the pandemic under control first. So, vaccinations are really key here, as well as making sure that we're continuing to implement proper mitigation tools and not hamstringing those local governments that are trying to do the best for their people and for their businesses. That being said, there was a specific fund for the restaurants that we have been pushing for. I believe like 30 billion or so for restaurants and bars specifically. We know that they have not received the aid that they have needed, required, and that they have been severely impacted, especially those that have done the right thing and remained closed or at limited capacity to make sure that they are protecting their workers and their customers. And so we recognize that. We feel that the government should be providing for those businesses so that they can continue to do the right thing and protect their workers. And I will turn it over to somebody else in case I might be rambling.
I think
go ahead.
Everything that, early on in the pandemic, we saw that, what was able to come out of Congress was, 3 monumental bills as well that touched on a lot of areas of the economy. One part that didn't get included in any of that was the Restaurants Act. And so that was something from our small businesses across the country. You saw so many businesses come together and fight and ask for this support. And finally, it came into the American Rescue Plan. And, like Kelsey touched upon, I think workers want to know that they're in a safe environment. And in some states, we have conflicting, there's federal support, but state mandates are different. Then city says one thing, and then the county says another. Restaurant owners.
Have you been in Tucson?
Yeah.
And
I'm a former restaurant owner, and I've managed plenty back in my day, and I look young. But
you are young. It's okay.
Putting individuals in those positions as well as employees puts that small business and a lot of them aren't political. They just want to get into their business. They want to serve their customers. They want to go home. They're not making millions of dollars at some of these restaurants. They're just getting by. So when something like the pandemic comes by and they're about to lose everything they possibly had, they were left out in a lot of the provisions that came from the federal government before this new administration. Because I remember the backlog, and probably both offices as well, when the EIDL and PPP loans started coming in, and our constituent services cases just went up in those areas trying to get answers. And so, it was much needed support that has come out now. And these are direct funds. So these are not, you don't have to go through your bank and go through Chase and be prioritized in a different way, whether you're lending it, relationship is one way or the other. This is direct from SBA, making sure that those funds go directly to those resources. And,
SBA, I know we're very good at acronyms. What is SBA?
Small Business Administration.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You had an education too, so I'm like, I know what it is, but just
you're lucky this isn't a military conversation, because then it would just be, acronyms too.
Acronyms all over the place. Yeah.
Yeah. But that, that's still a program that is being in the final stages of rolling out. We also in our community know that we love live venues as well. And we have the Rialto, and we have, Fox Theater, and all these different arts components to our community, because a lot of the money that comes into Southern Arizona is from hospitality, is from our hotels and our restaurants and our live shows and our tourism. And, that a lot of that has been addressed in this bill with the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant. as well as the provisions of the Restaurant Revitalization Fund as well. So hopefully that needed support has come, because again, since the last administration failed to include some of these things, Pima County and the city of Tucson stood up individual programs to make sure that these venues did not close forever. And that even these venues or small restaurants had to make decisions to close or to open and just, serve some customers. This bill is hopefully going to address some of those needs from them going forward.
Yeah, I think that you touched on what I heard also in that Small Business Commission meeting, where we have the governor saying the pandemic is over. We have a president saying you need to mask up and still continue to mitigate. And then we have a city that is saying, no, we're still have a mask mandate. But then all around us, we have neighboring little cities that are saying there's no mask required here.
Right.
And so, I know, and there's a lot of different social media groups that have popped up that is like, who's being safe? And that's where I go. Or who's continuing to require masks when you go into a grocery store. And contactless pickup, I think, is one of the best things ever. But, when you have to go in, it's like, I want to make sure that I am confident that everyone around is going to have a mask. And when you have the security officer that is watching you walk in with the mask that is like, holding up its chin, you're like, hello, that's supposed to cover all of this part. And you're standing next to a sign. But I do think that there's a lot to be said for just people being tired. I mean, it's been over a year. People are tired of the pandemic. And I understand that, but it's not over. And so the quickest way to do that is by making sure people are vaccinated. And I hope that part of this is going to be the creativity that comes out from different cities and individual communities on how we can really encourage people that are still sort of on the fence on whether they want to get the vaccine or not to become vaccinated. And that's going to continue to be a challenge.
I think one thing that I'll just reiterate on this is, remember that, and this is for anybody listening, remember the difference of rhetoric that was coming out of the White House from now to a few months ago. It's very different in terms of what the response should be from individuals, what the response should be from local, business owners. And I really think that leadership has helped in some way, actually in a lot of way, to making people, like you said, feel comfortable getting the vaccine, going out and making sure that they're doing the things that they need to, because before that role was abdicated. Right? That it was pushed to the states, it was pushed to the counties, it was pushed to the cities to make those decisions. And in reality, it should have been the federal government leading that, so that we were all speaking with one voice in one direction, like other countries did to get out of the pandemic sooner. I don't think any of us, Adelita, I like you a lot, but I want to see you in person, right? I want to make sure that we can, do things that we did previously. And the only way we can do that is as Americans as a whole. And I think this bill touches on a lot of those aspects to help us get there. But like Kelsey has said and Joanna has said, we're not there yet, but we're getting closer, and we just need to stay the course. And public health is paramount when we're looking at the decisions need to be made going forward.
Mm-hmm. So just wanted to add one thing, if we're talking about small businesses and also the economy. And I think one thing that has been overlooked, I mean, we're focused on the public health response, which is extremely important and an essential part to recovery. But we also need to look at the childcare investment. One of the things that I think is not really talked about a lot is, this $39 billion investment in childcare. For a lot of parents, that's a prerequisite for work. For a lot of single mamas, a lot of single papas out there, childcare is absolutely, number one, it's expensive. And I know, because I have been paying childcare for a couple of years now, and I think Kelsey has too. And number two, when we're talking about a lot of the essential workers who, you had a lot of childcare businesses, which are small businesses, a lot of them were shut down because they didn't have the resources that they needed to stay open. And we know that early childhood education, because childcare is not just babysitting, they have a curriculum, they teach children something, right? When parents have the access to that, they can get back to work. So as we start looking at recovery, we need to find a way to get parents back to work. If they don't have the school-aged children, and they have to use childcare services, right? Like that is going to be an essential part of not just only taking care of our children and make sure they're set up for success, but also rebuilding our economy.
Mm-hmm. Yep, because that was one of the things that was key with employees in the city and the county. We were doing meetings and I could see that people were home because their children are home. I mean, schools were closed, so you had to be home to help. And I don't know how many little kindergartners can get all of the stuff that they need together. Most are not staying home by themselves. It was really, or they're with older siblings. And as a mom of a 14, 12, and 10-year-old, I will tell you the 12 and 14-year-old will not be helping that 10-year-old. It's like, I'm focused on me. The doors are all closed. Everyone's in their own little classroom. And the poor Joaquin is running around like a crazy person. So it just worked out that my husband was able to stay home because the campus that he works at was also closed. But that's not the case for a lot of families. And one of the things that was really critical, and I hope people really understand the function of our education system and our schools in our communities, is that TUSD had to set up a food delivery system for food security to make sure our babies were eating, because they weren't. And that to me we weren't even as preoccupied with making sure everyone had a laptop. It was like, we have to make sure everyone's eating. And that is something that, I don't think a lot of other communities really factored in when you're talking about, when schools close, oh, well, we'll figure it out. The teachers, who a lot of people just equate to, you're just babysitting. It's like, now I think more than ever, our communities and our country appreciate the role of educators, because I've had an opportunity to sit in a classroom lately, and it's amazing. It is amazing what these teachers have been able to do. So I hope that part of the ongoing conversation about supporting the recovery of our nation is really treating our educators like the valued professionals that they are, and pay them what they're worth. So that's my plug as also a governing board member. That is it's been the most frustrating thing for me, where it's like, you need to open up because I need to get back to normal. It's like, do you appreciate what these people are doing? They've created an entire classroom on a platform that wasn't done before. There's just been, it's been amazing to watch, I gotta tell you.
Well, one of the things that really was highlighted by the pandemic is the cracks in our system that have always been there, but has been transparent to everyone. I know that on this call, the four of us are deep in those conversations every single day about the inequity in school lunch programs, or access to internet, any sort of Wi-Fi for some students, transportation, all of these things that we knew were just on the edge of breaking, but still able to get us by or get families by. The pandemic really showed what is broken in this country. And one of the discussions that our office has to continually have, and is now having those discussions, is because Representative Kirkpatrick is an appropriator, is that what happens after the pandemic? We see the need increase. We see the resources need to be increased across the board in the federal government in these social programs, and making sure that we do have the right safety net, as well as the robust programs to support these individuals. We need to make sure that this funding stays at a new level, a new increase level, and not go back down to its previous. And it's not for the government's role of what people think big government is, this overspending, but adequately spending to support. And Kelsey, hate to keep saying what you've already said, is support the programs and the individuals that were already there, that the things that aren't just about the economy, but the true economy of the United States, which is the health and well-being of the individual family. If we're able to support those mechanisms, then we're able to be a more prosperous country. And we need to make sure that Congress looks at that going forward and is able to have the foresight to say, we need to expand some of these programs, and we need to support them going forward, and we need to develop on top of them rather than reducing them back to their previous levels. So, and we've had these discussions with PCOA, Pima County Council on Aging, about our older populations that are having some of the same issues because of the pandemic, not being able to get food assistance programs or food assistance to some individuals. And, you know, those are the discussions that are happening now. Is, you know, we need to have this conversation as a country, because it's not just our community having these issues, it's everyone across the board.
Absolutely. Yep. Either Joanna or Kelsey want to add to that?
One thing in terms of education, you know, I think Arizona received like what, 2.5 billion or something like that for education. I think Superintendent Hoffman was surprised that we'd actually gotten that much for education. You know, I think there needs to be a consideration, to Billy's point, of the additional support systems that our students will need, that our children will need as they go back into this, you know, in-person environment. You know, thinking about school counselors and that mental health aspect and how they're adjusting to that new environment. It has been, you know, a lot of people like to say, you know, kids are resilient, they're adaptable. Yes, but that doesn't mean that we should forego, you know, having these resources and services in place. So I hope that there will be some advocacy for those programs, for more school counselors in our schools to address some of these issues that our kids will bring back into the school system with them.
Yeah, and also we have a lot of children with special needs and exceptional education plans, individualized education plans that required speech therapy and physical therapy and other therapies that weren't available. And so a lot of those students have done some backslides in the strategies that they were provided and had been practicing all, you know, there's been a year where that hasn't happened. So we're going to have some real investment in making sure that those children get to where they need to be in order to continue to be successful. And it's pretty amazing, you know, what has been able to be done online, but some of those things can't be. I think it's pretty difficult to do some of those therapies online. So we only have 15 minutes left. I told you that I was going to go by really fast. But I guess maybe what I can ask each of you is, what are you personally most hopeful or excited about that's part of the American Rescue Plan, or what this nation is moving towards? And I'll go ahead and start with Kelsey.
Well, I was going to take a moment to think about it. No, I'm just kidding.
You can totally. I think I'll open it up, and then then I'll pick on you. Because I think what it is it just gives us an opportunity for hope, that there is going to be some support, that people that we're not going to continue to be invisible to the nation at large. And even if our state isn't willing to see us, that our federal government sees us. I think that investment in education is so critical, that when we're able to support our most vulnerable populations, that the rest of us are going to prosper. And it's not about they get this and they get that. It's like we all get some of the services that we're going to need, and it should be differentiated based on what our needs are. Some communities don't have the infrastructure problems, don't have the internet problems that maybe some other communities do. So we're going to direct funds to where they're needed most, so we can all get to a point of equity and not equal. And that is going to be something that our cities, local boards, you know, counties are going to have to really prioritize, I think. But I'm excited about the possibility that we can get to a point as a nation where I get to go to a restaurant and people watch and hang out, and we can give each other hugs and not really say, wait, when did you get vaccinated? You know, that kind of stuff, being able to hug our parents. I mean, those are huge things that we've all missed out, and our babies have missed out on being able to get in touch with other people. My son told me the other day, he's like, I love you guys. I really do. But I just see your 4 faces anymore. I was like, I get you, kid. I understand. So that to me is where I'm excited about us as a nation moving forward. So now I'll go to Kelsey.
So yeah, mine's actually similar, because, you know, whenever we first were working on COVID relief packages, I went to Representative Grijalva and I was like, this is such an opportunity to address so many inequities. And I was excited. I was like, let's make sure we put money here because we need to really focus on these communities that have been disproportionately impacted by underlying health conditions and this and that, and people working essential jobs. Let's give them hazard pay. And I was really excited. And then we passed several bills, and the pandemic continued to take its course, and it took a much harder course on communities of color. Latinos have been hospitalized at 3 times the rate, and they have died at twice the rate of their white counterparts. And slowly my hope that we were going to build back better, if I'll take a phrase from the Biden administration, started to kind of dwindle. I thought this was such an opportunity, and we kind of ruined it. But I think with this new package, and with a lot of really, really hard work and targeted response and making sure that money, I think it was Lee that asked about the, how are we going to track the outcomes and have the oversight? It's so important. But we have passed a lot of money in this bill. And if we can really target it right, I am still hopeful. I think that, the health inequities that have been in our country since our history, since our founding, and have only gotten worse over the decades, have been split wide open. And I still think we have failed so far, I will say, I believe, in this pandemic to address them. But I think that we still can. I think we see that we need to build up our healthcare workforce. It needs to be culturally appropriate. We really need to invest in these communities that need it the worst. And Adelita, you're right. A disproportionate harm requires a disproportionate response. It does. That is like public health 101. And so I am really hopeful that we can get there. I don't think we've got there yet. I think that the American Rescue Plan is a start, but we really need to make sure that those funds are dedicated appropriately. And if we do that, we will. I think that we can. And also, I agree with you, Billy. I think that this should be a baseline, and that we should continue to build off the success and continue the investments that are needed in the people, for this country to prosper, and make sure that we are all getting an equal opportunity.
Yep. Thank you, Kelsey. Joanna?
I keep hearing the reoccurring theme of hope, and to me, this act, this plan is, I look at it as an anti-poverty plan to lift, folks who have just been struggling for such a long time. And for me, this is just the beginning. I think that there really does need to be, in addition to everything that we've already talked about, what really matters is, that the voice of the constituent, the voice of our communities, what do they need? And it's going to be absolutely imperative that folks advocate for those needs in their communities. So I guess my call to action would be for, folks to reach out to their local elected officials, reach out to your county supervisor, and, ask them about the funding and where they plan to allocate the money, and then make your ask about what you think your community needs. It's so important. But for me, I'm just excited about all of the added benefits for working families. As a single mom, as a working mama, for me, I can only imagine how folks have been scraping by. It is just so devastating. So I'm really excited for that. And of course, we're all here to help you. So if any of you have any questions, you can reach out to all of our offices. We do our best to make sure that you get what you need from your government. So I'll just close it on that note. I know Billy has quite a few things he wants to say, probably.
Probably not. I mean, they've been said by 3 remarkable representatives of our public, our government. But I think the biggest thing is, I've said before, this is the first step. We saw I think a redirection when this new administration came in, and a reinvestment into what needed to happen at the beginning of this pandemic. And that is really the foundation of where we need to go going forward. This isn't going to be the last funding bill. And this is why we see the sort of the robust workings of the next infrastructure, or the infrastructure bill, is that it's not just roads and highways and Wi-Fi. It's the infrastructure of what actually moves the American economy. And I think people are going to start to see what is really the fabric of this country and how we can truly support that going forward. And I'm like Kelsey, hopeful for the future. I know that Congress and the Senate and the administration have, we have a mandate of the next 2 years of what we can get done. And I know that all of our offices are trying to work in unison to make sure that at the end of the day, we can pass comprehensive legislation that really touches each American household in a positive way and renews the commitment that the federal government is here to support, and that we want to make sure that individuals have the ability to live their lives in this country in the best way possible. So I'm really looking forward to the next few bills that come out that support some of this first action in the American Rescue Plan, and really get us on a path of American revitalization plan, something that really builds on this first step. So that's what I'm hopeful for. And like Joanna said, all of our offices are here. The largest part of our office in the district and our leadership by Carla Avalos is constituent services. So if individuals are having problems with the federal government, whether you're getting your stimulus check or having evictions problems, or having any sort of problem that involves a federal agency, please reach out to us, and we are happy to help. This is the bulk of the work that we get to do in the state, is on behalf of the individual constituents. So happy to have this conversation.
Thank you. And what we're going to do on the bottom of the link is make sure that we list all of the grijalva.house.gov and Kirkpatrick, and O'Halloran, to make sure that people have access to individual members of Congress. And then there is a White House page on the American Rescue Plan, so we'll make sure to put information there as well. And then what we're going to be doing in District 5, and I'm sure every member of Congress is doing it, is like, this is how it impacts our specific district. And then I'm going to try to piece those together and get something for Pima County, because I do think it's important that people understand that is something that's really critical and important, is that not only do you understand that these funds are coming, but where they're designated for, and how you as an individual and as community groups can advocate to your elected officials. And that's really important. And one of the reasons why the American Rescue Plan was framed the way it was is because we reached out to all of our members of Congress saying, we need you to have the funds come direct, because they didn't come that way the first time. And if we weren't having good communication, I don't think that would have happened. And that's going to be really critical for us moving forward. I think that, I don't know, one of the questions that I had listed is like, what got you involved to work with the work that you currently do in Congress? Like, why did you decide to do this kind of job? And I feel like so much of what is this plan was the reason. Like, you just have like this, I want to be able to do all of these things, and this plan covers so much. But we don't have that much time left. And if I just want to personally thank each of you. I respect all of you. I think that your work is so critical, and I really do like all of your members, all of your representatives. I am very proud to be in Arizona, and when I look at the delegation that is representing us, and I just want to thank you all, because I know you're all so very busy and have a lot of commitments, and you taking the time to speak to whoever's online now and whoever's going to watch this later, just to talk about what this plan is and how it benefits us. I'm very appreciative, and I want to thank you for your time.
Thank you
for having the discussion.
Of course.
Yeah.
And for helping people understand what's in this package. It's so important. It seems like sometimes we pass these and then it's not fully understood. So this has been a great conversation.
Yeah, I'm glad. I knew I wasn't going to have to talk a lot, so that's nice.
I the full dollar amount that came to Pima County was just over $200 million. So if people are looking for that statistic and to hold our electeds accountable, $200 million to the county to support all of these resources. So,
well, thank you all, and thank all of your bosses for letting you have some time to hang out with us. I appreciate it. Happy Saturday. Stay safe, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah.